Welcome to the REI Diamonds Show with Dan Breslin, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom.
Welcome to the REI Diamond Show. I'm your host, Dan Breslin, and this is episode 161 on Avail, the free property management platform for self-managing your rentals with founder Laurence Jankelow. Today's episode ranges from a description of how to use this free platform to automate your rental management, save you time and money, followed by some discussion including Lawrence's and mine real estate investment philosophy. In other words, the reasons he buys what he buys. And then we wrap the corner with the correct perception on how to consider advice espoused to you as either relevant or junk for your own situation in life. Let's jump right to it, shall we? All right, Mr. Laurence Jankelow, welcome to the REI Diamond Show. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
I should have asked before, but did I butcher the last name in any way, or did I get it right?
No, you got it right.
Perfect. Cool. So we have an interesting episode here today. You and I are both recording from Chicago. The weather is identical out my window as it is yours. We are social distanced enough, you being at your house and me being at mine, to respectfully do our show. But for listeners who might not know about you or what you have going on, do you want to kind of give the Reader's Digest history of how you maybe did some real estate, got involved in real estate, and then what you have going on today, Laurence?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to give that background. I started as a do-it-yourself landlord. I've been doing that for 7-8 years. I've got 2 buildings, each with 3 units, so pretty small landlord. But the way I was able to get lucky enough to get those properties was just hard work at normal, corporate America job, 9 to 5, or at least I wish it was 9 to 5. Started my career doing business and risk consulting at a consulting firm here in Chicago. Did that for 4.5 years. Moved on to Goldman Sachs, supporting their hedge funds and alternative investments. And at both places, it was just a lot of work. But it afforded me the luxury of starting to think about passive income, financial independence, starting to save for down payments on rental properties. And I was lucky enough to buy my first few while I was working. And then working those kinds of hours, I realized like managing rental properties as a do-it-yourself landlord is tremendously hard, and can be time consuming. And so a buddy of mine and I decided we were going to start a new business, quit our jobs, and try to start a business that helps specifically do-it-yourself landlords manage their rental properties. And so we did that. We set out to build an online platform that does kind of all the operational tasks do-it-yourself landlord would need to do, from finding tenants through listing syndications to hooking into credit bureaus to get instant credit reports, providing state and city-specific leases that can be signed online, allowing landlords to collect their rent online and therefore their tenants to pay rent online, and those kinds of things. All the things that when Ryan and I were doing this in our full-time jobs, we found that we were just not doing it adequately enough, or spending more time on our rentals than we really needed to do. So that takes me all the way to today, where now, we're running this business. We've got 600,000 landlords and tenants using us successfully every single month. Just trying to spread the word of about Avail, about our story, and how do-it-yourself landlords out there don't need to spend so much time doing it themselves.
All right. Yeah. A lot there to get started. I appreciate that. It's interesting. I mean, we do a lot of deals at Diamond Equity Investments. We're mostly buying, fixing, and selling to retail buyers, or we're buying and, doing cleanup, selling to retail buyers, or we'll buy and sell to investors who will end up doing that renovation flip. And we take a small profit for that as well. We did like 223 last year. We're probably going to double that this year. We're blessed to be in a really decent position, and we're growing as a company. All of that said, I kind of have that 9 to 5, which is more of like a 5:30 in the morning to like 10 o'clock at night, around the clock kind of a thing with my main business, with my company, Diamond Equity. So I can relate to that. And I bought a few rentals along the way too. I have a small portfolio, 3 flat in Chicago, and Humboldt Park is one of them. I forget, maybe 8 or 10 of them in Philly and another small building. But I kind of ran up against the decision early on, and I decided, like, I didn't want anything to do with the tenants at all. I think the first 3 flat, I had tenants picking the phone up, calling me. That building is still a little bit of a thorn in my side personally, because it's like the rents are high, so I don't want to put it with a management company and get charged a percentage of the high rents. And like, higher rents in a neighborhood typically are lower maintenance tenants than, lower rents generally. That's what I found across my portfolio in Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Chicago here. So where I'm going with that is it's like a big headache for that property, because I kind of have to self-manage that one, where all of my others are at arm's length, and I just talk to the property manager, and they handle the leasing, they handle the turnovers, they're handling the evictions, the repairs. Like, almost all of that noise is kind of kept at arm's length, and I appreciate that. I don't mind paying for that personally, because I view my rental properties as sort of like a retirement account, a savings, a tax vehicle. It's not like I'm trying to squeeze every dollar out of that. However, I could see where somebody who had maybe a little more of a stable, less intense full-time real estate thing going on, and they actually had a 9-to-5, they might be, more concerned with that self-management, kind of like making sure that the thing makes as much economic sense as possible, and value that portion of the real estate investment over what I value, which is it's a future long-term thing, and I value the arm's length, and I'm willing to pay for that. So it sounds like Avail is more for that investor, kind of on that valuing, maximizing the economic value of their asset, of their rental portfolio, by being slightly more hands-on and kind of doing some of the management themselves. Is that correct? Would you mind kind of elaborating on that? Maybe touch on the self-manage in your world with Avail versus somebody like me who's I'd rather just pay for the management. What are the differences there? Have you experienced that, made the decision maybe even yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly we have that kind of investor who uses our platform and they're trying to maximize their income. That's certainly a type of investor that uses us. More so, I think the type of investor who uses us is someone who, without us and doing it themselves, wouldn't be an investor in the first place, because real estate can be really, the margins can be smaller than most people expect. And so normally you try to shoot for some sort of 6% to 10% margin, or cap rate, on your rental property, and that's how much money you're going to make. And if you use a property manager, that could take you from being profitable to not being profitable, especially if it's your first property that you're going to buy, where you don't have the kind of scale that you need to buy a larger multi-unit building, and you're buying either a single family home or a 3-unit building. So we see a lot of those kinds of investors who, if they had to go down the path of using a property manager, they'd have to get out of the game, because they're not going to be making any money. One of the things you want to do is try to make sure money's coming in every month and not going out. And there's no sense in holding real estate just for appreciation if you don't have to. So that's I think a larger part of who we cater to. And what they're looking for is to get their lives back in a way. They wanted financial independence. They went down this path. And they're seeing that, they've got to put in the 10, 20, 30 hours a month, which isn't tremendous, but that's enough time where you're not spending with your friends or your family. And they're trying to get some of that time back. And what Avail allows is automation of many of the tasks that they would otherwise have to do, as well as giving them a lot of the education and process work so that they don't have to guess, what am I supposed to do next and when. So we find it extremely beneficial, somewhat of a replacement for property managers in some things.
Yeah, I like that. And I like what you said too, which I think is important for people getting into the business, is that the margins are often much smaller than we expect. Like the 20-some door portfolio that I have, I think it roughly breaks even. And so I'm constantly having this battle with myself. I don't know, maybe you could relate, or some of the listeners could, where it's maybe I should just sell these. They're not worth the headache. I don't even care. I'll break even, whatever the case is. The margins they're not really moving the needle at this point. And that's how it's been. I think I started buying rentals 4 years ago. I've been in the business 14 years now, but just started buying those rentals 6 years ago. I was a flip guy, just flip. The part of my debate, if you will, about the rental property sale, whether or not to sell them or keep them, starts to make more sense long term. And what I mean by that is the rents that I bought back in 2016, the rentals, those rental rates have increased. So I've made an intentional effort through the property manager with the tenants to like pay attention to making sure we do the rent increases so that I'm matching pace with property taxes or just inflation in general. And I think making rent increases is really critical piece, which may or may not be possible here throughout the end of 2020 with COVID hanging out. That's a different conversation. But long term, I've watched those rents increase. I don't know, 10%, 5%, whatever that percentage was a year. So it started to make a little more economic sense to hang on to them as time went on. I also noticed the mortgage pay down, which was something I would totally ignore before. Before the goal was, you know, I want to make $500 a month from every property, positive cash flow. If appreciation comes, great. I'm not even counting on that. And I didn't even acknowledge the depreciation for the taxes or the mortgage pay down. But you get, 6, 8, 10 doors, rental properties, houses, whatever it is you're buying. And all of a sudden there's, $1 million in value there in, let's say, houses, and you might owe $700,000 or whatever the case is. I don't know what the actual balances of a given portfolio are. But you come back at the end of the year and all of a sudden you add it up and it's like, oh, wow, I made, $35,000 in like mortgage pay down. I didn't do anything. And then like the second year, maybe it's like 39,000. So, oh, okay. Then the next year that's like 40 or whatever the case was. So I'm seeing the long-term benefit in holding the rental properties. I'm sure there's people who are like on the front end cursing themselves or the day they bought that 1-3 flat or, whatever it is, their small portfolio, because like you said, they're spending 15, 20 hours, trying to get their life back. So I see the long-term benefit, but let's switch gears a bit. I want to go through the life cycle, if we could, of like a tenant or maybe like the landlord who's onboarding to Avail.co. Like, let's talk that through as if I was going to sign up for Avail. And, one of the things, I'll be honest, I go to Avail.co, the site, check out the app. And one of the first things is requesting background reports. I didn't know where to get any of that stuff. I always relied on a real estate agent to fill that one building in Humboldt Park that I self-manage, and I pay them the first month's rent. I don't have time to go look at it. But one of the reasons that I always hired that out was I didn't even know where to start with getting that. So, like, what are some of the things that, let's say someone was going to buy a rental property, or maybe they just bought one and it's not even leased yet. What are some of those, like, things they're going to face that you've helped a lot of people deal with?
Yeah, I'm happy to. That's actually our bread and butter, is working with people who haven't leased the property or they've got an upcoming vacancy and they want to get new tenants in. And we find what we offer them really allows them to avoid the leasing agent, keep that full month's rent. And that, that's a huge amount of money to put into other things or saving for your next investment. So the way that looks like with us, when someone signs up for Avail, they'll typically add one or all of their properties. We make it really easy. And you're going to be prompted to get those properties in the right status on our site. So for someone who's looking for a tenant, very first thing you're going to want to do is create a listing with us. So you'll upload photos, you'll write a description, kind of the standard stuff you would expect. And then we take that listing and we syndicate it across the web. So we know that tenants aren't looking at Avail. It wouldn't make sense for them to come to us just yet. But they are looking at Zillow and Trulia, Hotpads, Apartments.com, Rent.com, Zumper. They're looking at all those websites. So we've partnered with all the major websites, and we'll take that listing and we just syndicate it to them. All of those leads that are on those various websites all get filtered back to Avail. So whenever you log back in, you're seeing all of your leads in one place. You're not having to log into Craigslist or Zillow every single day and manage those leads. You're just getting one place to do it. Often we find that we're getting our landlords 18 or so leads in the first week or two. And that's a tremendous amount of leads. So naturally leads you to the second step. What do I do now that I've got so many potential renters? And you want to start screening them. So normally you would have them fill out a rental application. They'll provide their rental histories, employment history, employment and income verification. They'll authorize you to pull a credit or background check, all those things. And you would take a look at that application. It can all be done in 5 minutes. And you'd say, okay, I want to move forward with this tenant or these tenants. And if you do, then you would go ahead and you would go forward with the credit report. And so they would then authorize it. They do it directly through the website. They pay for it directly through our website. And in real time, you'd see their credit score, credit report criminal background check, eviction check history, all of those things, so that you can kind of take all these leads and all these applicants and decide who you're going to move forward with. At that point, the next thing you want to do is sign a lease. And where a lot of landlords have problems is feeling confident that the lease they have is going to uphold in court or have the right clauses or the right things. And they're very worried about clauses, but they even miss some of the other stuff that you're supposed to do around disclosures, around attachments you're supposed to include, some of the language you have to include that are very city and state specific. So what we do is we provide you a city and state specific lease agreement to use. It's a template, so you can customize it if you want, although we recommend landlords don't. And then the tenant will sign that digitally within their Avail account. Landlord will sign it digitally within his or her Avail account. And from there, you've got now a finalized finished lease ready to go. Tenants can, once that happens, pay their rent or first month's rent, security deposit, ongoing rent through the system. They'd log in, they'd pay that. And then if they want, they can set up auto pay, and all that happens in the system. And then on an ongoing monthly basis, tenants can submit maintenance requests to the system. So all the operational stuff that a landlord thinks about on a day-to-day basis, all somewhat automated and flows from one service to the next.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. If I didn't have to do the showing, I mean, even take the phone calls or look at the leads personally, I'd be game. But like, if I wasn't so busy with the main company that I have, this sounds very, very solid. So the maintenance requests would come through to me to hire my handyman, or is that something you guys involve with yourselves?
Yeah, it's flexible. So if you have a handyman for that building that you use or for your various buildings, you would just attach them to the tickets. So that can be automated. In your settings area, you would just pop in the handyman's email address, and then they would be included. Or on a per ticket basis, as they come in, you can farm them out to whoever you're used to using.
Okay. So you guys don't get involved in like actually performing maintenance or anything like that, right?
Not today. Now we have an extensive roadmap where we want to get more involved in that. Some of the hurdles that we want to try to accomplish that makes it hard to do today, but we see a path in the future, are making sure that the rates and fees you're getting charged are fair. Even today with property managers, they're somewhat not incentivized to get you the best deal. A lot of them have relationships with kickbacks that they receive for using specific agencies or contractors. And so what we're trying to figure out is, how do you do this in a way where you where someone who isn't you and it isn't your money is still looking out for your best interest. And so we think we have a path forward on that, and then we're trying to work there, but we don't have that today.
Gotcha. What kind of fees are involved with your service? And then we'll switch gears after that and talk about some rental things.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So our service, entirely free. So as many units as you want or have, put them into the system, do everything we just talked about. It's entirely free. There are some things that do have some fees, though. So the credit report, typically the tenants will pay for that. It's $55. They're used to paying that. It's not something that we get a lot of pushback on. We also take a $2.50 fee for whenever a tenant's scheduling rent payments. We find that to be the same economical value as them writing out a check, putting a stamp on an envelope, sending that. So we don't get a lot of pushback there. But that does allow the service to be entirely free for landlords and virtually free for tenants as well. And then there are some options where, if, as a landlord, you want to customize things, there's a premium plan. But for most landlords, the free plan is extremely sufficient.
That's pretty cool. Is the company profitable?
Yeah, I mean, as a business owner, like the way you look at profitability might differ. So if I look at cash flow from operations, very profitable, right? Our unit economics are extremely strong, but we're growing really fast. So we take a lot of money and spend a lot of it on marketing for future growth. So as a whole, no, business isn't profitable, but that's on purpose for future growth. What we're doing now is paying for future streams of growth.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think PayPal was kind of set up in a very similar way, probably a much less unit economic friendly way than you, but I mean, that's probably a conversation for us in a different venue than we are now. So let's talk about real estate, Laurence. I mean, what was it that originally drove you to buy that first one? So you have a background in business and risk consulting, and so like you walked into this first investment. I assume you had some mind map thought process toward what risks were with real estate. So how did you view that first investment when you wanted to take that first leap?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier in the podcast around your 20-unit building and should you keep it or not. And it sounds like, every time you talk about finance or you give financial advice or why you got involved in something, it really depends on each person's situation. In your situation, it sounds like you got into it more for long-term planning, maybe retirement, maybe a nest egg. And for me, the reason I got into real estate was specifically for passive income. I wanted to have financial independence from my corporate job, or if something happened in the economy, have some independence there. For me, it was a safety net, not a retirement plan. And, based on whatever decisions you make is going to have a difference in how you view real estate. For most people out there who are looking at it for retirement, you may not care so much about cash flow on a monthly basis. You care about the appreciation. You care that when you sell it, you've got this built-in savings and retirement plan. And for me, I wanted cash flow. So I look at properties that specifically are shooting off something between 7 and 10% cash on cash return. Now, there's not that many of those, but that's what I shoot for. And that's the reason I got involved. And now I've had various properties. I only have 6 at the current moment just because of the business that I'm running doesn't allow me the time that I'd like. But still, I love doing real estate stuff. I love having tenants. I actually enjoy engaging with my tenants, which is probably an unusual characteristic of a landlord. So every time I go into their units, I'll see stuff that isn't right, that they didn't have a maintenance request for, and I end up working on those and fixing those. I like replacing their air filters. I don't know. I'm weird in that way, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I feel like I try to do that. I don't have the time to actually go out to the property and change the filters myself, but I'm putting central air conditioning units in, and I'm kind of slightly over improving the property by doing this for the tenant pool that certainly my property manager is used to dealing with in this neighborhood, in this building, in this price point for rent in Chicago. I feel like I'm doing the right thing for the tenants, even if I don't necessarily go face to face and do the work myself, but I am investing the capital in there. I changed the roof. I didn't fix the roof. I feel like I'm caring for my investment. I feel like I'm caring for the people in the neighborhood. I feel like I'm putting a good product out there, and I should be able to attract a good tenant who feels the same and appreciates that and wants to live in my property for a longer period of time, I hope. So I feel like your and my mentality is kind of the same, and we want to put that premium product there and do right for the people that are living there versus milk every penny out of the property and not pay for the repairs because we're worried about the economics. I mean, the world might be a better place, huh?
Yeah, I agree with all that. A lot of people think penny pinching is going to be the cheaper, easier way. And I don't think that's true. I think, maintaining, I think you said the quality product or apartment or rental is actually cheaper in the long run, in my opinion. You're not having to constantly maintain, and all those maintenance costs do add up. You're just delaying some of the inevitable things. And then keeping tenants and keeping high quality tenants is, going to obviously increase the income side. I think it's the better path in all regards.
So I have a friend, and I think at the time when we were having this conversation, he had 70 or 80 houses sprinkled throughout Philadelphia. And I remember he's we were doing another kind of a deal together, a flip or something like that. And the conversation was kind of I'm looking at him like he's got it all made. He's got 70, 80, 90 properties, whatever. He did a lot of the self-management. He kind of had his own admin people and stuff. I had known him for years at the time. And I'm like, yeah, it's great having 80, 90 properties. He's like, yeah, but at the end of the year, I don't really make any money on them. I'm like, what do you mean you don't make any money? Well, one unit goes vacant, the turnover is $4,000 or $5,000. That's 4 or 5 months rent right there. Plus, it's actually vacant, so I don't collect rent if it takes me a month, 2 months to turn that over and find another tenant. That's another 2 months of lost rent at $1,000 a month. So I'm $6,000 for every turnover, and I don't know, 6% of them turn over every year. I'm like, man, that's not really a great thing. I kind of feel like mine are sort of breaking even too. I mean, what's the reality with yours? Have you actually ended up getting the kind of returns that you were looking for so far? Or is like your goal sort of end up going to be like mine when the rent increases and the pay down happens at some point in the future, that passive income we got into the real estate rental business for becomes a reality? I feel like the reality is it's always kind of still in the future someday when the rewards are going to be enjoyed.
Yeah, I feel like my situation is probably lucky. I mean, I've only got 6 units, so I think it's easier to do a lot of these things when you have fewer properties. For mine, I've never had a vacancy in the 7 years I've had the 6 units. So
nice.
Normally, I've got a very tight process that I follow. You know, my background was in business and process consulting, so I think in terms of processes. So I'll have tenants move out on the first of noon, and the next ones move in at 4 o'clock that same day. And I got 4 hours for a cleaning crew to come in there. So I have a very tight turnaround. I make sure to list the property exactly 60 days before a lease expires. Tenants typically sign their next lease with still like 30 or more days to go before they move in. I don't leave a lot of things up to chance or last minute stuff. I also find that when I'm a planner and I do things well in advance, the kind of tenants I get are also planners. And then by nature, they share more information. So if they are planning on moving out, I had a tenant move out earlier this year, because they bought a house, but they told me 6 months before the lease was up that, hey, they're going to be looking to buy a house and not going to renew. So I knew with so much time that I wasn't scrambling. And so I think there's a combination of I'm lucky to have only 6 units. I'm a planner for sure. I give the tenants a high quality product and platform for having a high quality life in the apartments. And because I have a relationship with them, they're usually very conversational with me and friendly, and they give me huge amounts of heads up before they move out. And because of that, I am making the returns I expected.
Nice. Yeah, great answer. It makes me feel sloppy in my process, but it is what it is for me. But it reminds me of another friend with 100+ units, same market, guys in Philadelphia, and he had the kind of mentality that you just described of he would do the same thing. The tenant would move out in the morning and somebody would be moving in that night. In fact, he would have tenants where the place needed some paint and he like drops off a Home Depot gift card and paints it as if it's good news. Guess what? You guys can change. You can pick the color out. Here, I'm going to pay for the paint. All you have to do is paint it. Like somehow he spins it so that the tenant ends up helping him or doing some of that turnover for him. And the same kind of thing, proactive in the lease clauses, lease function. He's listing the properties the same day, 60 days before the tenant moves out. There's all kinds of penalties for not necessarily notifying him, and he manages to do that with 100 plus properties. And I haven't talked to him in about a year or two, so I would assume he's sold a few of them off. He's getting up there in his years, but tight management and rentals. Like, I don't know, I guess my view of my rentals is not the same as my view of the business. My view of my business, Laurence, is like super detailed, process-oriented, all the I's and T's dotted and crossed. We're planning every executable move that we have in the business. And then I have my rental portfolio, which is probably how I would view like a stock portfolio almost in a sense. It's definitely not that same level of detail, time and attention that I would put on that versus it sounds like yours is the same way you look at, the business is how you're also executing and looking at the rentals. Did you have more than the 6 at any point and have to actually pare down the number to kind of focus on?
Yeah, I mean, the most at any one time was 7 hours. I had a condo unit. And then I technically also have a car wash where the car wash rents from itself. So property management, there's no tenant turnover. But I think what you described is exactly right. Like it's a lot, real estate is like, but also not like stock investments. Stock investments really are passive. You're not doing anything. Maybe you're putting in some research time to figure out what it is that you're going to buy. Maybe it's index, but once you have it, you're doing nothing until you decide to sell. And I think maybe there's a misnomer of calling real estate passive income because it's not really passive. You actually do have to do a lot of work. And for that reason, we actually encourage a lot of our customers to start thinking about their rentals as a business. thinking about it as it generates revenue as rent or other things, and it has expenses, and you want to maximize the revenue, you want to minimize the expenses, you want to do right by your customers. Just because the customers are tenants and we don't call them customers doesn't mean they aren't customers. And I think there's something there around thinking about your rentals as a business, which helps you bring in the right people if you need help. It helps you think about long-term planning better. It helps you think about all kind of the aspects of how you want to grow that business, I think is a useful way to just classify it.
Yeah, I really like how you describe that. I mean, it's not stocks. And when I bought the first 6 or 8 of houses in my portfolio, I had them on the management company, and it was sort of out of sight, out of mind. And then I figured out in the subsequent year or 2 years of owning them that, I kind of have to be proactive with my property manager. I literally had to start to view that and figure out, like, what is the work I'm supposed to do? Even though I had the manager didn't necessarily, raise the rents, which all the properties, that's kind of my target. So my investment philosophy is to buy properties with under market rent. I don't care much if it's a single family or multifamily. I'm kind of gearing more to a multifamily so I can consolidate my investments into like one tax bill, one insurance bill versus 8 if it's an 8-unit building. But my investment philosophy is to buy where the rents are low so that I can increase the rents, maybe by doing repairs sometimes, and more desirably just by doing a rent increase, when I buy it, because they haven't raised the rents in 10 years. For me, that's my opportunity zone. I see an occupied tenant turnkey rental that this landlord never wanted to raise the rent since 2009. They've been living there. Obviously, they know that they've been stealing the property for the rent that they've had all that time. And the landlord, for whatever reason, they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to do an eviction. They don't want to risk having a vacancy. They don't want to risk having to do an eviction. So they never raise the rent. So for me, that's my opportunity. And I want to get in there and raise the rents. But I had to learn that skill set of, managing the rental amounts and making decisions on just how much to increase the rent, when to introduce the rent increase, just how to handle that one little negotiation with the tenant through my property manager was something that when I got in the business, Laurence, I assumed that the property manager was going to keep it rented at the highest rates. Like they would have interests that were aligned with me, the investor, but that's not the case. To your point earlier with the maintenance, markups, kickbacks, etc., the property manager has their own interests aligned with their business and turning a profit from servicing you. They don't necessarily take an ethical, moral high ground in seeing to they look after the interests of all the property owners that are in their in their network under contract with them. That's not really the case, but I assumed that would be the case, and I had to learn it the hard way. Now, my property managers are not necessarily bad people. They're not stealing the money from me. They might be marking up my repairs when I have them, but I don't have to do that. But at the same time, I had to figure out how to get a little more out of my rental portfolio, which was something where, to your point, stock portfolio is nothing I could have done to make them pay higher dividends. I'm way too small of an investor to go hold up the board meeting once a year or something like that. But I can have active input and action on my rental portfolio and make a difference. I actually like that now that I've discovered that. I like that level of control on top of the selection that I made when I bought the properties to buy them in the right location with the circumstances that they had, maybe with low rents. Did you have any kind of selection process when you bought, or would you, if you were to buy more properties, have a selection process for, I'd go after this rental property for this reason? This would be my rental real estate investment philosophy that you could share with the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually like your philosophy, which is on, the under rent places that you can then try to add value. I think there's something to it. I think where you make money in stocks is at the time of purchase. Did you buy it at the right price? And I think that's also true of real estate. You wanting to buy real estate at the right terms, at the right price for the right purposes. And I think what your process there is fantastic. For me, it's not too dissimilar. What I look at is, and it's going to be location dependent. So what I'm looking at is what I can do in Chicago. In Chicago, like single family homes, I can't really go for those because people buy single family homes on an emotional basis. So they're the return isn't there because people are willing to pay more for something that's not what you're going to get for return, but because they can see themselves living there. So I'm forced to buy things that are typically 3 to 5 unit buildings here, where you're not buying them as an emotional investor, you're buying them for the cash flow that they make. So I'll look at something called the gross rent multiplier here, and I'll try to find places that where the gross rent multiplier for that building or unit is lower than the rest of the area. And then I'll look for ways to increase the rent a little bit. So there's simple things you can do. Often, like the building we bought, the last building we bought was they didn't have washer dryers in each of the units, so we added that, and that alone increases rent like $200 per unit per month. And you apply that gross rent multiplier on top of it, so you're getting more rental income and you're getting a huge amount of appreciation in the building. So that's generally my philosophy. Under GRM, and a way I can increase rent to bring it up to the average rent multiplier.
If someone were getting into business, maybe the question is for you too. Did you, when you bought, target a property that was kind of move ready, maybe even turnkey with tenants in there, as opposed to buying something that needs full renovations? I mean, which one from a risk profile and kind of being a smart move for the investor, maybe just getting started, would be maybe the better idea?
Yeah, hard to give financial advice specifically there. But those are two paths, two good paths. You could buy something that's turnkey. You're going to make less money on it, which is fine. It's, lower risk, lower reward. Alternatively, you get something that isn't turnkey necessarily. And turnkey doesn't mean it doesn't have renters. It just might mean there's a lot of deferred maintenance. Maybe it's not at market rents. And you have to put a lot of work in to get it there. And I think which one you choose really depends on your goal and what you're wanting to get out of it. I think if this is retirement building for you, I would take the turnkey because over time you're going to get that appreciation. It's a forced savings account in a way with, appreciation that's going to outpace inflation, you would hope. And I think that's a good path. If you're looking for passive income to start coming in now, and you're wanting to potentially build up wealth faster, I would steer someone towards something that's maybe not turnkey ready, something where you can get higher yields for the higher risk, especially if potentially you're younger and you've got a higher time horizon. Those kinds of things are really good if you're trying to follow the BRRRR method. I'm not sure if your listeners are familiar with that. That's the buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. So if you're trying to build up a portfolio over in the next several years, you kind of want something that allows you to do that and build wealth. So it depends on the goal. For me, I'm looking for the passive income and building up a little bit of a portfolio. So the first property I bought had a lot of deferred maintenance. I actually got it from a friend who was moving out of the state, and he was looking to sell it. It was the 3-unit building, and I bought it from him. We didn't use a real estate agent, which saved us a ton, both of us a ton. And so that gave me a really good entry point. And the deferred maintenance was a lot more than I had planned, but allowed me to increase the rents as I fixed everything up and try to build that up. And now the equity we have in this is a lot. And I'm looking at doing a cash out refinance right now to pull out a lot of that money and then use that to buy another building.
Chicago specifically, what are your favorite neighborhoods if you had to pick them to buy in?
To buy in. Well, I like some of the ones that are kind of on the fringe of Lincoln Park. So not in Lincoln Park, but really outside of the fringe there. So I really like Ravenswood, North Center area. So really nice area, but underrepresented or underappreciated versus the rest of Chicago. But is as safe and as good as Lincoln Park, just not in Lincoln Park. I'd say some of the areas just west of Bucktown now are probably pretty good. South Loop is probably overdone now, but you can go just south of there would be decent. So there's actually a lot. I'd say like the fringe of the good areas.
And for people who are listening from around the country, these would kind of be like what, Class A minus type rental apartment product to kind of put it in perspective. You're getting like professionals. They're paying pretty high rental rates for the market overall. I mean, is that kind of the right description, or would you add to that at all?
Yeah, I call it A minus if I had to give it some sort of grade based on the rent amounts and the type of backgrounds that the tenants have. Typically very stable jobs, slightly higher earners, not the highest earners, but higher. So I tend to find there's a lot of advantages there around stability. Obviously, there's a lot of disadvantages there because you just don't get the volume.
And when you say volume, are you meaning the volume of deal flow that you can buy into, or what would be the volume?
Yeah, deal flow for certain, but also the lower red places. If you've got a certain budget and a certain amount that you were willing to invest, you can get a lot more properties for that budget if you're going more C or B. And I'm not sure how you would classify these ratings. So just relatively, if you went for a C or B, you'd be able to get a lot more properties. You'd be able to diversify a little bit more. And you might get slightly higher actual cash, maybe lower cash on cash. The true amount of actual dollars you take home might be more that way.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, there's a case for both points. I mean, your stable jobs, stable tenants who are a little bit more capable of playing by Laurence Jankelow's rules with, planning the move out, allowing access 60 days before the lease ends, and then having a decent enough, not holes kicked in the wall, doors ripped off the hinges, kind of a turnover that you can accomplish in 4 hours with the cleaning crew. That's going to be a quality product. Whereas I think I own a lot of them in not A type areas where like the turnovers are $4,000, $5,000, and $6,000. We got to paint, we got to change cabinet handles because they ripped the doors off. We got to change doors because the doors are ripped off. And my eviction rate overall in my portfolio, I guarantee it's way higher than anything that you would have experienced in your portfolio. And that's going to be part and parcel for the potentially quote unquote higher cash on cash return you're expecting to get in that B or C area, which would be like lower monthly rent amounts, and equals less stable jobs and stable tenant situations in some cases. I'm hoping that my long-term strategy will overcome that and I'll be able to select, the best people who have good, clean habits and living conditions as I've turned over these tenants. But, it's not necessarily more cash, but I totally understand your clarification on the volume. And I want to place an underline. You mentioned a few times, Laurence, about I can't give advice because I don't know the situation. And I think that's very important for anyone listening right now to our conversation is, hey, if you're taking advice from someone or you're listening on a podcast, it's really important to understand like the place in life maybe that person was talking about their experience and what their goals were and financially and where they were and what kind of cash they had in the bank, what amount of income they had to cover losses or, potentially to take on risks. So knowing someone's situation is critical. It's like a warning sign. I know for me, I listened to advice when I was broke, and I think like, oh yeah, the way to financial freedom is buying rental property. But wait a minute, I didn't have the $100,000 a year job as an engineer or, professional salesperson that the people who are like speaking about that as being the pathway out, they had that stuff. So I was trying to go after a goal that wasn't really the right goal at the time. My goal was better to flip houses and create that $100,000 a year job so that I could pay off my debts, file taxes for years in a row, and become bankable as an individual. So that was totally different advice than the people were like mentioning that I was listening to, and it really wasn't pertinent for me at the time. So it's important to self-evaluate if you're listening and think about like, hey, is this the right advice for me at the time? And maybe it's best to get tips, advice, guidance from people who really know you, know your situation, and take the time to like really think that through and don't just give that cursory advice because they were asked a question on a podcast. So I love the fact that you kind of posited with that. And I'll say now for the background of an investor who's just getting started, and then alternatively, for an investor like myself who's done hundreds, if not thousands of deals and will continue to do so, can you make a book recommendation maybe for each of those individual situations?
Sure. If you're brand new, this is going to sound super cliche, so I hate saying this, but the one book I would absolutely recommend is Rich Dad, Poor Dad for someone who doesn't think with the financial mindset yet, but kind of realize that they should or want to. That book's going to teach you kind of what you need to know with the core, like what's the difference between having a career versus having passive income versus being an investor versus being, a business owner. Just framing those things can even help you set the right life goal, because maybe you don't want to do kind of be a business owner, or maybe you don't care about passive income and financial independence. Maybe you're the life where you just want more passion in what you do. Hard to think of those things for me, because my passion has always been financial independence, but super important there. Also helps you really realize what is a true liability, a true asset. People don't really realize, they think when they buy their primary residence that, great, I've got an asset on my hands. And from a technical perspective, sure, it's an asset. But you have to look at it from the frame of, does it put money in my pocket each month? And if it doesn't, it's not really an asset, at least not a cash-generating one. And that book's really helpful for someone who's really first getting started. For someone who's really been doing it a long time, it's not a real estate book that I would recommend necessarily. Instead, what I would recommend is something that helps you understand data and statistics better, or how the world can be kind of not what you expect it to be. For that, I would recommend the Freakonomics books. Those are really great. I think when I read those, it really helped me realize, like, hey, the way you look at the world really does depend on your perception and where you've come from, and all of that can change, and the statistics can be manipulated depending on what angle you want to look at things. And so that's been a super helpful book for me professionally, just having professional skepticism. Anytime I hear someone spout out data or surveys or studies, I think it has been super helpful.
I'm sure you must have been going through gyrations with all the stats and studies of the coronavirus lately, huh?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everyone wants to manipulate it in a way to drive what they want. Statistics is the best tool for lying. I mean, it's such a so you just got to be careful on where the source of the information, what their agenda is, and how they collected the data, because how you collect it changes everything.
Yeah, that's solid. I think it's ironic. One of the things you said was, for the professional, I don't have a real estate book. And I want to point out here that most, if not all, of the books I've read anywhere in recent history, the last probably 3 or 4 years for me, I don't think a single one has been a quote unquote real estate book. But again, if I were to tell someone who's just getting into business here, read Freakonomics, it might not have the same kind of impact for knowing where their situation was. But it does for me. I appreciate the non-real estate for the pro. I think that's critical, because you kind of shift from real estate tactics. We understand how to get financing. We understand how to do a buy, rent, rehab, refinance. We understand how to do a cash out refi. How to do a 4-hour turnover is a great skill to implement. And are you going to read 4 or 5 more books on exactly those same kind of things and get the same, next level leap in your knowledge and your execution? Maybe not. But it's funny how when you learn how to pull and glean information from other business models, business methods, people's perception, and kind of add that to your own. For me, at least, that's kind of, been the way to get to the next level in business. So, Laurence, as we're getting toward the end here, if you could go back and share the crown jewel of wisdom with your younger self, I don't know, 18, 19, 22, right out of school, what would that be?
I think I would have told myself to have that financial mindset earlier. When I came out of school, started working. I actually lived with my parents for the first couple of years. And then what I wanted to do first was buy a condo to live in. I thought that was kind of like what professionals would do. You try to get your first house. And that's not a good financial instrument. I think better would have been thinking, what can I do with that money to help me generate more money? And if I wanted to still have my goal of having a nice place to live, could I have combined those two and bought a 2-flat and lived in one of them, and had the other one generate some income? So I wish I had much earlier started thinking about, put the financial goals ahead of some of these emotional goals, that in the long run, the emotional goals are fleeting. Your emotions change all the time, but at some point you're always going to realize, shoot, I needed to have some financial strength. And the earlier you do it, the more it grows on itself. So I wish I had known that.
Good stuff. So if anybody wants to get some more information about you or maybe the company, where should listeners go?
Yeah, well, if anyone's interested in Avail and figuring out how to manage the properties themselves, they can go straight to our website, which is, avail.co, avail.co. And I'm happy to talk with people personally. So, I generally do like having conversations with landlords. So my direct email address at Avail is Laurence, LAURENCE, @Avail, AVAIL.co. And if anyone wants to email me and start up a conversation, I'd be happy to do that.
All right. Well, cool. Hey, I know we're getting to the top of our time here together. I appreciate you, Laurence, for coming on the show. I've got a couple pages of notes. It was a great conversation, and thank you for coming on the show.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the REI Diamond Show. Here's an insider's tip. You can receive new episode notifications by subscribing on your podcasting app or YouTube as soon as new episodes are posted, or you can sign up for the email notifications when new episodes are released at reidiamonds.com. At that site, you can browse the entire 161 episode archive of the REI Diamond shows. There, those episodes are organized in an easy-to-read menu format with the ability to sort by topic. It is much easier to find certain episodes that might be of interest as opposed to scrolling through the podcasting app or the YouTube format of the show. Again, that site is reidiamonds.com. So my main business is buying and selling houses, 223 houses bought and sold in 2019, and 121 bought and sold so far in July 2020 as I record this episode. We currently have another 106 houses in our inventory, under construction, for sale, or sold and awaiting closing. So here are 3 ways that you and I can do business. Number 1. If you buy houses in Atlanta, Chicago, or the Philadelphia region, go to dealswithroi.com and sign up for the correct buyers list. Note there are 5 lists in total, and they are separated by region. Number 2, if you are an accredited investor and you'd like to fund a deal or fund many deals, go to fundrehabdeals.com and sign up to receive private mortgage investment opportunity emails. And number 3, if you have a deal for sale, preferably on a house that I can flip or a turnkey rental or multifamily property I can buy and hold in Atlanta, Chicago, or the Philadelphia region, please send me an email with the details. I'd be happy to make an offer. And number 4, I know I said 3, but right now I actually have a 4th way that you and I can do business. I am currently seeking a few A players to round out the team, either located or willing to relocate to the Atlanta, Georgia market, the Jacksonville, Florida market, or the Philadelphia market. Full details are posted under the careers link at dealswithroi.com. Along with some very specific instructions on how to raise your hand of interest for those positions. Since this episode may be heard months or even years after I've recorded, I suggest checking that link for details on any available positions with our company, as we are growing in several markets around the United States and expect to add additional team members consistently going forward. So that concludes this episode of the REI Diamond Show. Next up, I've invited decorated Army Ranger, house flipper, and brilliant financial advisor David Blaine to discuss how to invest in your life, not just your portfolio. Detailed financial discussion with an expert who understands where we, the real estate investor community, are coming from. So until then, my friend, Dan Breslin, signing off.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Diamonds Show with Dan Breslin. To receive email notifications of new weekly episodes, sign up at www.reidiamonds.com.